Hello, good afternoon to all of you. You are welcome to this important event. My name is Gertrude Jifatovic. I'm the Program Officer for Feminist Africa Journal, University of Ghana. This webinar, From Science to Action, Climate Risk Analysis to Support Adaptation Policies and Planning at a local level in sub-Saharan Africa, is a very important one and very timely. This year, the world has been experiencing extreme climatic events. We have seen flooding in parts of Germany, Belgium, France, UK, wildfires in Greece, Turkey, Canada, the USA, and many other parts of the world. Today's webinar is timely because it focuses on sub-Saharan Africa, where high levels of poverty pose extreme challenges to climate change adaptation and resilience. The event is in two parts. The first part comprises the welcome and keynote speeches and a screening of a short film. The second part is a roundtable discussion with a group of practitioners, scientists, and experts. Now for some few house rules. You kindly introduce yourself in the chat box, your name and organization, country of residence, etc. in the chat box. To post questions, send reactions and reflections, kindly write them in the Q&A or chat box. We will post some questions to you during the roundtable discussion. You will answer electronically. That will be announced later in the program. Now, to come back to the first part of the program, to welcome us to this important event is Professor Christophe Grunotte. Professor Grunotte is an agricultural scientist, leader of the working group Adaptation in Agricultural Systems at PIK, and chair of the Department of Agroecosystem Analysis and Modeling at the University of Kassel. He conducts interdisciplinary research aiming to improve food security and resilience in tropical agricultural systems and investigate climate impacts on agricultural and strategies of how the agricultural sector can respond to changing climatic conditions. At PIK, Christophe Grunotte has attracted and is leading more than 20 research projects and works closely with a diverse set of institutions, active international development cooperation, and other relevant stakeholders. Professor Christophe Grunotte, please have the floor.
Thank you very much for this kind words. And yeah, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleague, a warm welcome also from my side. It's a great pleasure to have you all here, and warm welcome from my side and on behalf of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, short PIC. Yeah, I was already introduced. So my name is Christophe Grunotte. I work at PIC and leading there the working group on adaptation in agriculture systems. And it's a great pleasure today to have you here for this very important meeting. At this point, I would like to take the opportunity to thank in particular the University for Development Studies in Wa, in particular our colleague Francis Jamutura. I would also thank the Ministry of Food and Agriculture in the Upper West in Ghana for their enormous potential political support. And I would also thank the Ghanaian Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, particular, and we has worked here a lot since years with us. I would also say thank you to the EU project REACH, where we had a lot of workshops with and also discussed our results. My special thanks goes today to the BMZ and the GIZ, so the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, GIZ, and the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ. They both have enabled the study and constantly supported this work. So thank you very much. This side event today is part of the African Climate Week. And I would say again, welcome to join this event today. As we have already here today, we will have 2 keynote speeches followed after my short welcoming words. We will have a movie which shows new results of the Agrica project, and this will be followed by a roundtable of 6 remarkable representatives from different political and scientific institutions. And the most important part, I think, is then also opening the discussion to all of you and including your thoughts, your ideas, and your comments in the entire discussion. So this will be the event. And this side event is organized, as already said, within the Agrica project. The Agrica project is implemented by the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research in close collaboration with the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, GIZ, on behalf of the German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development. The aim of the Agrica project, you have seen already in the title of this session. The aim is from science to action. And I think this is very important these days. There's a lot of science ongoing, but we really have to make sure to bring these scientific information into action. And to do this, with the before mentioned institutions, we developed a tailor-made approach to bring information, to bring scientific evidence in the process of political decision-making and inform the NDC and NAP implementation process. This has also the idea to include from the very beginning and all levels stakeholders in this process. We included the stakeholders already early in the selection of the adaptation measures. We already worked with them closely on the national level, informing national governments, ministries. We also worked at local level, informing farmers and farmer associations. And we also worked at the international level, having these results presented at international climate negotiations, the COPs. The spatial focus of Agrica is, in general words, sub-Saharan Africa. We have started with a study in Ghana, followed by a study in Ethiopia, Burkina Faso, Niger, and as a new country, we will continue our work in Uganda. I guess this also fits very well to the context of the African Climate Week. The history of Agrica starts in 2018, where we started, as already said, our first study in Ghana. The study showed a lot of interest at various levels, and at the end, there was a high demand for a regional and local assessment in addition to the study. As you all know, adaptation measures are implemented at the local level. To make this more central and more concrete, so we need the global picture to understand climate change. We get information from global models, but these models have to be translated to the national level to bring these kind of information to national policy processes. And this in turn is then needed for local implementation. And I guess this is very important to have these then at the local level available to actionable results. In addition to this, it is also important to consider, when it comes to the local level, the different groups at local level and different levels of vulnerability which exists. And because of this, we started this Ghana district study, which we will discuss and present today. Ladies and gentlemen, climate change requires a rapid transformation of all economic sectors, but in particular, the agriculture sector is very climate sensitive, and here most action is needed. This is especially true in sub-Saharan Africa, where we find the most vulnerable groups and where we have already, or where these groups already face strong impacts of climate change. And because of this, we need to focus more on adaptation. In general, we have good practices available, but these practices have to be evaluated. These practices have to be prioritized, and based on this prioritization, they have to be implemented. And therefore, a close collaboration with all key actors is needed, and in particular, in close collaboration between science and the development corporations to provide evidence-based policy advice. With these words, I would like to thank you, and I wish you an interesting event today and a fruitful meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Christoph. And we have the keynotes, the first keynote address or speech to be delivered by Samuel Lanidun, who is a development worker and head of Department Education and Inclusion at ProNet North. He has extensive experience in community mobilization and facilitation, participatory planning, data collection and analysis. He has worked with national, regional districts and community stakeholders. His agribusiness support farmers with good agricultural practices and climate change adaptation advisory services. Samuel. Samuel, can you unmute? Okay.
Yes, yeah. Thanks, Jafar. Yeah. Hello. Thanks, Jafar, and
Yes.
thank you for being part of this. As you rightly said, I'm Samuel. I have been involved in agribusinesses, and I have been working as a development worker with ProNet North, which is based in Upper West. My business equally operates around Upper West region, and it's a privilege to be part of this panel. Basically, I would say that the issue of climate change is real. Having been in the system and working with farmers, we have all realized the erratic rainfall patterns that are happening in the region, and of late, currently in the Upper West, we had a lot of floods, and there are issues related to climate change. So it's a very important topic for discussion this afternoon. And it is my belief that as we go along, more education will be sent down to the farmers. And once the farmers get to know what strategies they are to put in place to ensure that they overcome these challenges, then we are sure we are all moving towards achieving the ultimate goal of food security for everyone. This is just by introduction. I guess as we go along, there will be further discussions as to what we are to do together to ensure that these activities or strategies that we are trying to put on board come into play. So, Jafar, I will conclude by saying that I'm prepared to give practical examples as to what we can do to contribute to this topic to ensure that climate adaptation policies and strategies are implemented at the ground level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samuel. Samuel said that climate change is real. And Paula Ashibrena will talk to us about what the project has been about. Paula works as a researcher at PIK and analyzes changing climate conditions in the project regions. She mainly works with climate model data, investigates the quality of climate projections, and provides subsequent climate information to stakeholders. She coordinated the study climate risk analysis for identifying and weighing adaptation investments at the district level in Ghana. Paula.
Thank you, Jifa, for the kind introduction. Yes, I'm very happy that I can present to you some study results. And I think the study results will also underline what Samuel just said, that climate change is already on the way and that it will continue to be something that will occupy our minds in the future. I will try to share my screen. So I hope you can see it. So I will present to you today some results of the study of the climate risk analysis for identifying and weighing adaptation strategies for the agricultural sector in northern Ghana. And as Christopher has already said, now we want to talk in this panel about how we can bridge the gap between science and action. And this study tried to do exactly this. It tried to inform policymakers and practitioners about what we know about science, what happens, what are the impacts of climate change at the moment, and what we can actually do to minimize the impacts that are already now and will happen in the future. And the study was conducted by the Potsdam Institute of Climate Impact Research for the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, the GIZ, on behalf of the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And we closely cooperated with the University for Development Study at the REACH project, which should be named here as well. So as I said, the goal was really to provide scientifically sound information, and especially this on a local level, so that it can be ensured that the information is really suitable for smallholder farmers in the region, and we focused on the Upper West region. I can show you in the next map where the Upper West region is. So here you will see a map of Ghana, and you see that we focused on the Upper West of Ghana, and we specifically focused on 3 districts in the region. This is Sala East, the Lora, and the Wa West district. And these are 3 districts that have relatively similar climate, but not completely equal climate, and they have different socioeconomic conditions. And the climate is in this way special there because it has only one rainy season, which is around 5 or 6 months. So agricultural production is limited to this 5 or 6 months. And if then climate change hits or rains start late or something like this, then the year for smallholder farms is especially difficult. As Christopher already shortly introduced our scientific approach, we work with an impact action chain. So we first look at what are the impacts of climate change, what are impacts on crop, what are economic impacts, and what does this mean for smallholder farmers. And then in the second step, look at what can we do and analyze different adaptation strategies. And for this, in the first step, we look at how did the weather change in the past and how is now the climate projected to be in the future. As a second step, then we look at what does this mean for crop production in the region? How are yields projected to be in the future? And what socioeconomic and especially economic consequences does this have? And what also was very important for us in the Upper West region is that we also looked at how does climate change impact different groups of farmers differently. So are there different impacts depending on the gender, on the migration status, on the financial status of the person. And then in the second step, we analyzed different adaptation strategies that were suggested by our stakeholders, and we analyzed them with biophysical conditions. So we used crop models and saw how suitable they are for the conditions in the Upper West region. We did an economic analysis, and of course, we also interviewed experts and did literature review to see if the adaptation strategies are socially accepted. And in the end, we analyzed the different uncertainties associated with all our results. During the whole approach, our stakeholder engagement was very important. This was done with kickoff workshops, with validation workshops, but also expert interviews. And in this, we ensured that there is a participation from different stakeholders coming from very different backgrounds, and that we consolidated and validated our results throughout the whole process which took 1.5 years to finalize the study and always validate our results with the stakeholders that were there. So now coming to the results. First of all, we looked at how does the climate change. And here you see two different graphs. One is the temperature, how temperature has evolved since 1950s in the Upper West region. And then you see how rainfall has evolved since the 1950s. And you see the temperature has steadily increased in the last 3 decades. And for rainfall, you see that there was a drought in the 70s and 80s, and slowly since then rainfall is recovering. But there's still a very high year-to-year variability, with some years still being very dry and some other years having heavy rainfall and flood events. But generally what can be seen in this graph that climate change is already there. Temperature has increased by 1 degree until 2010 already. If we now look at how our temperature is projected to be in the future with different climate models, we see that the trend that is at the moment there, the increasing temperature trend, will persist in the future as well. So you here see results under 2 different emission scenarios. You see under future low emissions, so when we are more or less in line with the Paris Agreement, following this blue path, then until the end of the century, only 1.1 degree more can be expected. But if we have very high future emissions, then until the end of the century, we could have even 4.8 degrees more. And our current policies are somewhere in between. For rainfall, the projections are not so clear. You see again in blue, you see future projections under the low emission scenario and in red under the high emission scenario. And as you see on the bandwidth, that under the high emission scenario, future rainfall is very uncertain. So it could be much drier, it could be also much more rainfall in the future. Increase in rainfall is a bit more likely than a decrease. But what can also be seen if we have low emission scenario, these uncertainties are much lower. So then we can expect that rainfall will more or less be stable over the next centuries. Then from the climate to the impacts on the crops. This we analyzed with different crop models, statistical and process-based crop models, and then found out that the impacts on crop production are mainly negative, meaning that maize, sorghum, and cowpea are projected to decrease in all of the analyzed districts, and only groundnut is projected to remain stable. And what could also be seen is that there are slightly different projections for the different districts. So Sisala East is a bit better off than the other 2 districts, and sorghum, for example, is projected to remain more or less stable in Sisala East, while decreases in Far West and Laura are projected. And this then has also to do with our next step, looking at how different groups of farmers are affected differently. And we there looked at different groups of farmers, for example, the different districts and locations, and we could already see that the location or the district of the farmer influences how vulnerable the farmer is then to climate change impacts. And we also looked at gender, at age, at migration status, financial situation, and education of the farmer. And these different social characteristics mainly shape 3 different things, namely the tenure security of the farmer, the access to assets of the farmer, and his or her decision-making power. And these 3 things are very much shaping the vulnerability of the farmer to climate change, and even more importantly, also determine the adaptive capacity of the farmer, meaning that if we do not include these different socioeconomic characteristics in our analysis and also in our adaptation planning, the differences in vulnerability will even increase in the future. Now, coming from the impact dimension, we then look at the action dimension and analyze different adaptation strategies. First of all, the stakeholders select the different adaptation strategies that they are the most interested in. These were improved seeds, irrigation, and 2 agroforestry measures, namely farmer-managed natural regeneration and alley cropping of cashew with legumes. And we analyzed these different adaptation measures with our crop model, with a cost-benefit analysis, with different literature, as well as expert interviews and workshops. And I will now not go into too much detail into the different adaptation measures because we made 4 short movies about the adaptation measures, and I will show you one after my presentation, because I think it's much more visible for you how the adaptation measures could look like and how they can limit impacts of climate change. Lastly, we then at the end analyzed also the uncertainties related to our results. And what can mainly be said is that science is there to reduce the uncertainties and that we need the research to reduce the uncertainties about climate change projections and the impacts of climate change. And no matter which scenario we choose or which model we choose, it becomes always clear that adaptation is more cost-effective than just coping with the risks of climate change. And this again supports that we need to do something now to limit the risks of climate change. This was just a rough overview of what we did in the study. You're warmly invited to look at our website, which is called akika.de, and see the whole study, but also see other study reports. So we also work on different other countries in sub-Saharan Africa. You see all of them here highlighted in orange, where you can find different results about the impacts of climate change, and also for some countries about possible adaptation strategies that are suitable for the climate conditions within a specific area. And thank you very much for your attention. And I would also be happy to receive any feedback or questions regarding the study and get into an exchange with you. So you could write down my email address if you want to. And then I hand over back to Jifa.
Thank you so much, Paula. And I think your presentation highlights many important things for us. Will you want us to continue with the movie immediately so that we, if there are questions, we ask together for this session?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we have the questions. We will have the movie now.
The Upper West region is one of the regions most vulnerable to climate change. Annual temperature is rising and is projected to increase by approximately 1.1 to 1.9 degrees Celsius until 2050. This has big consequences for agricultural production that eventually affects us all. A new study shows that the yields of maize, sorghum, and cowpeas are projected to decrease significantly in the Upper West region of Ghana. This sounds bad, but there is something we can do.
My name is Lawrence Zongo. I'm going to show you the 4 adaptation strategies that we've identified and analyzed to reduce present and future yield losses. The use of improved seed and then farmer seed, there are a lot of difference. Farmer seed normally yield lower than improved seed, and then those that don't have the money to go for the improved variety, they still use their own variety to cultivate.
Currently, improved seeds are often unsuitable for the conditions in the Upper West region and are not accessible or affordable for farmers. The regional and national government must therefore support the development of high-yielding and resilient seeds that are suitable for smallholder farmers in the Upper West region and ensure that seeds are available and affordable to farmers. More research in local breeding, including farmer participation, needs to be done.
Our second adaptation strategy is to intercrop cashew with legume. So they leave nutrients in the soil so that the cashew will also take it and produce more. And then will surely increase farmers' income.
Policy recommendation: incentivize sustainable small-scale cashew production that is integrated on the farm and utilizes the whole product chain, including the cashew apples.
The next adaptation strategy is farmer management natural regeneration. Farmers allow the natural trees to be there, where they take care of them, prune them, so that will give them good shade and also increase the soil fertility. The pruning can let the soil fertility increase, and then the plants will also have enough sunlight to also grow.
Policy recommendation: support the wide upscaling of farmer-managed natural regeneration systems on community and household level for smallholder farmers.
The recommendation of the study is irrigate dry season farming so that they can strengthen their livelihood by increasing income and creating job opportunities for farmers, especially the female farmers. The dry season, with this irrigation, female farmers can do a lot of vegetable to help themselves.
Policy recommendation: facilitate the development and maintenance of dams, canals, and boreholes for dry season irrigation in areas where it is economically useful and environmentally sustainable.
If farmers can practice these adaptation skills, it will help them. And if policymakers can also come in to help farmers, they will be able to increase their production and also get income out of it.
Thank you so much, Paula, and the team for this important film, which emphasizes what Professor Christophe has already said about emphasis on action. This is what we have seen on the field, and your presentation has already highlighted some of the things that should be done and what the risks that we are facing, really. So if you have questions for Paula, you can raise your electronic hands or put them in the chat box or the Q&A box. Okay, so we'll be waiting for your questions, but if you don't have them now, we will continue. And once you pose the question, let's know who you are directing the question to, so that we'll know if it's Paula who is answering the question. So that we are moving to the next part of the program, which is the roundtable. This roundtable has brought together a number of practitioners, scientists on the field. So I will introduce them, all of them together. We have Dr. Enchibosiako Amwa, who is the deputy director in charge of climate vulnerability and adaptation at the Climate Change Department of the Environmental Protection Agency in Ghana. Dr. Amwa is a lead member of Ghana's Nationally Determined Contribution, NDC, implementation team. He is deeply involved in the preparations of the national communications and biennial update reports in Ghana. Dr. Moore is currently coordinating the preparation of the National Adaptation Plan (NAP) project in Ghana. He's also an experienced climate change negotiator within the UNFCCC process and currently leads the G77 and China on the NAP's negotiations. Samuel is also on this panel. We've introduced Samuel already. We also have Ms. Joy Okra, who is a full-time woman agripreneur. She's the CEO of Awo Fuels Limited, located in Wa, in the Upper East region of Ghana. She's into crop production, aggregation of grains, supply and distribution of agricultural inputs and machinery. We also have Dr. Abdul Shimura, whose research in the PIK focuses on developing, improving, and applying crop models that can provide information on yields under current and projected climatic conditions. Then we also have Dr. Francis Xavier Jarawura, who is a lecturer at the Planning Department of the University of Development Studies. And he has been researching into various issues in rural development with a focus on the northern savanna of Ghana since 2007. His focus has been on migration, environmental change, and rural livelihoods. Francis is also the country lead researcher on the climate risk analysis project conducted by PIK. And Prosper Wie is an agricultural economist by profession. His interests, agriculture and rural development, especially of resource-poor smallholder farmers, and nature-based food systems for food production. He works in areas of value chain development, agricultural risk management, climate change adaptation, and agroforestry. He's working on the GIZ Competitive Cashew Initiative and Resilience Against Climate Change project as a technical advisor on production in the Upper West region. We will also have a poll, and so the technical team, MECO, our IT support, will put the polls there so that you will put in the answer electronically. So we'll do that, then we'll start the roundtable. MECO, do you have the questions ready? Okay, so you choose. Look at it. We would like to get to know our audience. We want to know you. So could you tell us which sector you are working in? So you choose, right? And then you submit. Have you all chosen already? Answer the question. Okay. So we'll have the second one. Okay. So many people fall in the other category. And then the government and international organization, and also science. Okay. So we have, thank you. So because we have people from the other category, we will also be interested in where that other falls. So you can put it in the chat for us to know where you work. Okay, thank you. The second one, what makes adaptation to climate change most challenging in your view? Okay. Okay, so we have seen the polls, the most challenging, finances, and which I think falls in place because adaptation is also a long-term project, and getting these things done, research to action is a very engaging one, needs a lot of money. And we also have information, suitable strategies, and political guidance and will. These are the three most important things that you think challenge adaptation to climate change. Thank you so much. Okay, so we come back to the roundtable, and each speaker will take 2 minutes to give us an introduction, what you'll be doing in the field. After that, we will have an interactive session. I'll ask some questions to particular people, and then we get it going. And for our audience, kindly put your questions, reflections, reactions in the chat box or the Q&A section. You can also raise your hand after the session. So Dr. Nchibusi Ako Amwa, what have you been doing in the area?
Okay, thank you so much, Jifa, for the opportunity, and also thank you to everybody, especially the organizers, for inviting me for this very important section. The name is Entry, simple. I work with the Environmental Protection Agency Climate Change Department, and I've been working in this department, I think, since 2009. For what I do, in fact, I am involved in policy development and then also capacity building, and then also implementation of some projects on the ground. Again, as the intro also went, I am part of Ghana's national team for most of the UNFCCC negotiations that go on. But since this is something that is being done at the district level or at the local level, I will just focus on what I do at the district level or at the subnational level. I've been one of the key lead officers in training the assemblies in trying to mainstream climate change adaptation into their medium-term development planning. Not only climate change, but also climate change and gender issues, which I also lead from my end. We've been training quite a number of assemblies since 2010. Apart from the training, I think I'm official vulnerability assessment and studies in some districts across the country. It's been a mixed feeling, because at some point in time you realize that there's a need or there's a gap that needs to be filled. And then at the other point too, sometimes you also don't have, probably beyond the technical capacity, you might not also have the other strengths, as we saw in the survey that we just did, financing, for instance, to be able to support these assemblies. But it's been very positive. From the time we started these trainings and now, I can comfortably or confidently say that for the DPCU, the DPCU is a district planning units that coordinate planning at the district level. I think awareness is growing. Even for some communities, they know something is happening. The change that the presentation actually indicated about 1 degree Celsius increase and other stuff. Some of them know what is happening, but they cannot connect exactly what the issue is. And this is where science is important. This is where understanding of the farmer or the local person to what is being generated from sector and then also at the subnational level. I'll be pausing here because the question was what I do, so that when there are specific questions to answer, I'll pick them and then answer them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And Samuel.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. You are back.
I'm back. Yes. Samuel, what I do, I've been supporting smallholder farmers to do crop production, and also supporting them with knowledge base as far as climate change is concerned. So Samuel has been doing more of climate smart farming demonstration fields for farmers to see, taking into consideration the whole concept of climate change. And Samuel is introducing the use of reaper as an alternative plowing, how will I call it? Production plowing method instead of the conventional plowing. Farmers, and also promoting the inputs of the use of also promoting the use of hybrid and then certified seeds at the community level. Mostly Samuel concentrates more on smallholder farmers, especially vulnerable women, and also encouraging women to look at alternative farming methodology or alternative livelihood that has to do with, besides farming, all year farming, besides farming, you can look at the whole issue of beekeeping as an alternative livelihood source that can give farmers income, and also looking at irrigation as an alternative livelihood for farmers at the community level. So Samuel, through this, also support farmers with all these inputs and support farmers to produce, and Samuel buys them, provide already market for farmers that have challenges in accessing market. So Samuel does a lot of demo fields for smallholder farmers to have an opportunity of understanding the climate change system that is happening, and also discouraging farmers from using the coping strategy instead of using climate smart farming. The areas that I operate, mostly mostly what happens is that you see farmers, when they do a little of 3-4 years in the field, they would rather prefer to move to a virgin area and go and destroy that area to start production again. So Samuel is discouraging farmers from that strategy and rather looking at how they can adapt climate smart farming in order to reduce desertification around the areas that I operate. So in all this, you realize that farmers are beginning to accept the concept. There is a gradual change in mind in the areas that I operate, or the communities and districts that I operate. So farmers are beginning to see the need to use certified seeds, hybrid seeds. Yes, we all agree here. The challenges have to do with cost, but science will have to look at involving smallholder farmers in producing certified seeds at a local level, so that they will not go back to the conventional or traditional old method of using seeds. And also science will have to look at how to encourage production of hybrid seeds within the country and lower the cost of the production, so that farmers can easily adopt drought-resistant seeds and look at what would I call it, drought-resistant and pest-resistant seeds so that it can boost production as we move along.
Thank you, Samuel. I think some of those questions, discussions will come later about the recommendations and
okay.
Yes. So, Francis, you are a scientist, you are in the university, and you also work with communities. What have you been doing, and what are the things we should be looking at?
Yeah, so thank you, Jafar. So I have been busy teaching students at the Department of Planning. So basically, I have in the past few years been researching into environmental change. I've looked at climate change, looked at adaptation options available to farmers and how farmers themselves evaluate these strategies. And then I have also engaged with policymakers over time, helping shaping policies at different levels. I have also been working, looking at migration as a strategy for adapting to climate change and how different households experience this. So it's been quite interesting, particularly over the last decade, that we have seen intensity in climate change science and also trying to draw in policymakers and also trying to draw the awareness of farmers and to try to further understand their perceptions of climate variability and climate change, and also to see how that plays into policy. So that's what I've been doing. It's been quite interesting, and also to have students at the bachelor level and master's level also have their opinions, and also to look at scientific works and also to appreciate them and to have discussions around them.
Thank you, Francis. And we come to Abdul. Abdul, we have been interested in agriculture intensification, diversification, agroforestry, conservation, agriculture, and resilience issues. What is happening on the field?
Thank you very much. So I work with crop models, and with crop modeling, we are basically using scientific approaches to quantify the response of crops or agriculture to the environment. So we have climate data, soil data, management data, and then we put this into our models, and then we can simulate crop growth, yield, and water dynamics. And this information, we believe it's very important in understanding cropping systems at various levels. And we also use this to explore the dynamics between the atmosphere, the crop, the soil, and we can assist with decisions on crop agronomy, pest management, adaptation strategies, and how we can reduce the yield gaps in crops. So basically, I can say with crop models, it's growing crops inside the computer and getting the yields from there. So that's mainly the work I've been doing in the project.
Thank you, Abdul. Prosper, you have been working with the GIZ on projects that target farmers, resilience to climate change and adaptation. Can you tell us a bit about what your work is about, what you have been doing so far?
Very well. Thank you very much, Jifa, for the opportunity, and a good afternoon to all the other colleagues. So I've been working largely for the past 3.5 years on agroforestry practices, starting with cashew, and how to ensure that we are enhancing, cashew development as a way of building some level of resilience to climate change. However, in the roughly past 2 years, I've been in the northern part of Ghana, Upper West, where the pig study was undertaken, and then implementing a project called the Resilience Against Climate Change. Largely, what this project seeks to do is to ensure or enhance, a sustainable, agricultural intensification practices like conservation agriculture, agroforestry, and how this affects, the livelihoods of smallholder farmers. And so, just like Abel said, we're trying to see technologies that will be farmer friendly. We are trying to see technologies that would already begin to build the resilience of farmers with regards to climate change. Depending on which device you find yourself, whether climate change is still far, whether it's near, whether it's here, our approach is how do we ensure that we are building resilience to either the looming climate change or the already existing climate change, depending on whichever device you find yourself. So we are doing this both at the communal level, we are doing it at the institutional level, and we're also doing it at the individual farmer household level. So communally, what we are seeking to do is to ensure that communities are trying to take up their own actions. Farmers may be willing to adopt certain practices, but some of the inhibiting factors may not, farmers may in themselves not be able to deal with it, like bushfires, like animal grazing and all that. So as part of the project resilience building, what we are seeking to do is to ensure that communities are building certain level of resilience in terms of some of their practices to be able to ensure that farmers are having that free will to be able to go around and then adopt practices that are climate smart and climate friendly. At the institutional level, it's a similar thing. Medium-term development plans of assemblies are then being, affected in such a way that at the district level they are looking at, climate smart policies to be able to ensure that farmers or the people living in the districts are really adhering to resilience building when it comes to climate change. Not only now, at the individual farmer level, that's why I already talked about the issues of adoption of conservation agriculture practices, agroforestry practices, and also farmer managed natural regeneration. And so largely, I would say in the past 2 or so years, this is what I've been doing at the communal level with farmers, engaging farmers on how to be able to build resilience to climate change. But as I said previously, I've worked on natural resource issues and largely cashew in the southern sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Prosper. Interesting that you talk about community ownership of adaptation and resilience strategies, which is very important for adoption uptake. So Joyce, you are in it. You are a farmer. You have a farm, our fields. What is going on there? As a woman, you are in the midst of this climate crisis and all that. What are you doing? What is happening?
Okay, thank you so much, Auntie Jifa. I've been in the Upper West since 2018, and basically I came to do farming, full-time farming, and it's been going well. And it's such a joy being a woman farmer, when I came to the Upper West region, most people, especially the youth, were not showing much interest in farming. So as I came around, I actually came to support the smallholder farmers, the women, and then also the youth to go into production for crops such as soya beans and sorghum for me. So during the time I've been with them, I realized that they had challenge with post-harvest losses management. So one of the major projects I took upon myself was to find a solution to post-harvest losses and also introduce crops that will benefit them in terms of climate change, and then crops with low crop budget for everyone to be able to afford to do. So, well, our fields is a full-time agribusiness. We are into crop production, and I do the farming myself. I go to the ground to do it. So basically, I pass through all the processes. So far, it's been good, and I might say a lot of the youth and the women are happy to see somebody like me going into farming. And sometimes they get surprised, they get shocked when I tell them I'm into farming. And I see myself as an ambassador, you know, encouraging the youth and the women especially, in spite of your educational background, going into farming and producing for the nation. I think so far it's been good. And I'm so grateful to be part of this meeting, and I hope we have a very successful one. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy. So, Dr. Amwa, where do you see the main improvements in the recent past and main gaps left in climate change policies in Ghana? And I also want to remind our audience that you can post your questions in the chat and Q&A box, or you can reserve them for question time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much once again. Some of the improvements made so far in the climate landscape. I think way back 2008, when we started talking about climate change in this country, some people probably didn't even understand what we're talking about. But today, when you move from one corner to the other, one medium to the other, you see the change going on. I think that has come about because of sustained awareness. And I'm sure that this is gradually coming up, and then it's going to actually see better improvement going up. Again, when you talk of climate change, I think you also need it, especially when you talk about climate change adaptation, then you are looking at it from medium to long term, because adaptation itself and development has just a thin line. And so it's incumbent for us to be able to strategize and incorporate climate change adaptation into our development discourse. This has been a gradual process, and for now, I think it's coming up very well, because we started with the National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy, which was developed and published in 2012, but the process started in 2008, but the actual publication came forward in 2012, within which 10 prioritized areas were identified as a country. The prioritization went through a whole lot of complex processes by wider stakeholders. And so once it was done, institutions and even donors started actually plugging into these prioritized areas by developing projects and programs. I can say confidently that most of the programs or projects that we see across the country, whether by the private sector or by civil society organizations or by government institutions, actually lay their foundation from the National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy. And later, we actually upped it up by developing the National Climate Change Policy, which has 3 main focus areas: mitigation, adaptation, and then equitable social development. From the climate change policy, now we have been able to tease out our commitment to the agreement, of which also to lay the policy background from where we're coming from. to today. And gradually, I think quite a number of institutional strategies have been developed out of this national vision, because everything that is done within the country has to be done within the national vision, in terms of resilience building, in terms of addressing greenhouse gas emissions in the country as well. And so in terms of policy, this is how I think quite a number of assemblies working through the NDPC have been able to incorporate climate change issues into their medium-term plans, and then also their ARPs, where when they are doing their reporting, to some reports are being done. I must say this is an area that is evolving, because even when you go to the assembly level, there's still huge capacity, first of all, to understand what the climate elements are, because climate change is an additionality to normal development. And so to be able to actually distinguish between what seems to be climate change and then what seems to be the normal development is really a challenge. And so gradually, this is where the focus has been from our end, so that we'll be able to enhance capacity at that level, so that the planners, the works, the agri department, the disaster department, and all the key departments at the local level will be able to actually appreciate what the lenses of climate and how they can actually incorporate them into their programming. Even climate change and health is one of the issues that is also being on the agenda. And so capacity is limited over there, but I think we've been working with quite a number of stakeholders. The joy from this angle is the fact that now I see a lot of partners who are also supporting these assemblies in incorporating climate change into their medium-term development. What is important is building synergies, because we don't want to also be bombard these assemblies with different information that might not actually seek to achieve one common goal. And so as we try to progress the discussions along this line, it's important that we synergize our efforts to be able to help these assemblies to be able to incorporate, because the best way to build resilience is to have them in your strategies. And once you have
Dr. Amwa,
then
maybe you can switch off your video.
Moves me to the next gap, dedicated financing for adaptation. I think it's a general problem. It's not so much different. So the next line has to do with financing adaptation at the local level. In fact, this is the crucial moment, because most assemblies, by creating awareness, you need to move to the next level, which is what? Having the programs and then the project on the ground to actually change lives, because policies themselves don't change lives. Policies must translate into actions on the ground. And these actions, most of them need financing. We're talking about irrigation as an alternative to off-season farming, which is right. But then who is going to finance the irrigation technologies in the first place? These are some of the things that we need to actually, as a country, because now we don't have dedicated budget as a country for climate change adaptation. And so we need to up our game as a country, and then also make sure that climate change adaptation sees the needed budget that can help translate all the lofty ideas that we've been talking about in this area. Unfortunately, a lot of things that are happening within the adaptation landscape are in pilot phases. Most of these pilot projects, because of the way they are conceptualized, never get upscaled or replicated in some other places. So you whet the appetite of the beneficiaries, thinking that maybe these things are going to happen continuously or maybe expanded. Largely, do you see these things actually happen in this phase that we are working with? And so this is something that we also need to address as a country if we really want to build proper resilience among the people that we are trying to help as a country. I think there are a number of things that we can talk about, but time will not allow me. So maybe I'll end here.
Yes.
For the others to also come in. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you have talked about many important things. You mentioned partners, and you also mentioned whetting the appetite of farmers and communities. So that's why I come to Prosper, who has been working with the GIZ. Prosper, how do you see climate change affecting livelihoods of smallholder farmers in the Upper West region, and what answers to this does your work at GIZ have? Do you also go and whet the appetite, or you are there for a long time, and what is going on with the GIZ project you are doing? Hi, Prosper.
First question on the more or less. Hello, Jifa.
Yes, we didn't hear the beginning. Can you?
Okay, so what I was saying was that maybe I start with the first question on how climate change impacts the livelihoods of smallholder farmers. Then I'll move to the next question of how we are incorporating some of the things Dr. Nchibo-Siako indicated in our work. All right, so yes, the Upper West region is largely agrarian. Most of the households are into agriculture. About 90% per our last checks through our study indicates that about 90% of people living in the Upper West region are heavily dependent on agriculture, either directly through crop production or indirectly through the gains from agricultural value chain, activities. And so it's very important, especially when we talk about the issues of the changing climatic conditions and relating it to the issues of climate change. To begin with, the region is quite handicapped when it comes to the rife conditions for agricultural production. Why do I say this? The soils are already very poor in nature. And so there's usually the need to occasionally or frequently add inorganic fertilizer, which is so much used to what farmers know. And also inability of farmers to get prompt and more efficient weather information, coupled with the issues of uncertainties around the weather, makes it very difficult for farmers to really predict. Farming is a business, and you should be able to, at the minimum, take some level of plan ahead and know that if I'm putting this X into it, I'm going to get Y. And so if farmers, one, do not have access to accurate weather information, coupled with the fact that the conditions of the soil are not too good, unless you use a lot more of, fertilizers, then the issues of livelihoods come into bear. From the pig study, we were told that some of the staples that really play a very critical role when it comes to household food security issues are being threatened. Threatened in the sense that yields are potentially, envisaged to go down, especially maize, which almost every household in the Upper West region, if not the country, depend on maize. Cowpea, the same. Sorghum, the same. So when these crop yields are being threatened by the negative impacts of climate change in that regard, then we are expecting some reduced yields, which will culminate into lower incomes. And once we are having lower incomes, definitely the food security issue at the household level, is going to be challenged. And when it comes to, reduction of poverty, i.e., getting enough to be able to cater for other socioeconomic needs like health, education, and other stuff, then becomes a challenge. And so it is really, really, really a huge challenge. And that's how come our project is tailored towards building resilience, bearing in mind that farmers are the most hit when it comes to issues of climate change, especially when their main economic activity is heavily reliant on weather. And the fact that accurate and reliable weather information is something that is lacking in the region, especially at the smallholder level. Saying that they are smallholders does not mean that they are not commercial in nature. And so if there's also a plethora of research. Every farmer in the Upper West region sells up to 50% of their produce, just to be able to cater for other, socioeconomic needs. And so if yields are going down, definitely their commercial activity is also going to be hampered, and that will end up, impoverishing them the more. It even becomes more dire when the issues of vulnerability comes to the fore, and you want to see how farmers are going to build adaptive capacity to be able to deal with the issues of climate change. So it's really a serious issue, and I think the conversation around this, and especially the savanna zones generally of the country, should be improved. And as Doc rightly mentioned, there's a need for us to champion the talk around climate change at all levels, institutional, community, and even at the household level, and not just advocating, but also we trying to get the needed funding to be able to implement some of the activities. It's good we have an all year round, farming, but if the capacities are not there, for instance, to build dams, mechanized boreholes in irrigable areas for farmers to be able to take advantage of this, then it ends up in the usual rhetoric. What, however, I think is a more practical approach, I think we've already made mention of it in the past. There's increasing population. I think the recent the housing and population census, the summary points that was advertised by the Ghana Statistical Service indicated that our population had increased from some 24 million to about 30.8 million, which was envisaged anyway. However, with this increase in population, we also envisage that in the near future, we are going to be having issues around land and land uses in general. And so agriculture, to some extent, bearing in mind what we've seen elsewhere, agriculture has always suffered when it comes to land pressures, because agricultural land is usually being sold for residential, uses, for other, uses. And so once we are moving from an era where we had that luxury of land to an era where there will be pressure on land, there will be the need for us to rather intensify our agriculture rather than extensification in terms of size. Now, if you intensify agriculture through conservation agricultural practices, you can be on one land, 2 acres, 3 acres, 5 acres, and even get improved yields if you are to adopt some of these conservation agriculture practices. If we are to incorporate agroforestry principles into our farming practices, we'll be able to diversify our income sources. And irrespective of what the climate does, at least you have some amount of income coming from the other sources of production. Then again, this part of the country is so much blessed to have a lot of what we call natural resource products, like shea, dawa, tamarind, baobab, and all that. These are natural resource products that we need to manage essentially as farmers to ensure that we are incorporating some of these things into our agroforestry practices. Let me leave it there and tackle briefly. Briefly.
Samuel, I wanted you to also talk about the GIZ and how you are responding to those threats that you mentioned quickly, briefly.
Okay, so we are currently promoting conservation agriculture through farmer demonstrations in communities. We are also promoting agroforestry through the supply of, improved quality seedlings to farmers to help them build, that resilience in terms of diversification in that regard. We're also offering a number of trainings to agricultural extension agents, to farmers, to be able to build the resilience. Institutionally, we are also supporting planning. I think Doc made mention of it. We are supporting the planning of some 14 MMDAs in our joint program area to ensure that their medium-term development plans are climate smart. Unfortunately, our project started at a point where the preparations for the current MTDP was really well advanced. And so we are rather targeting the next MTDP, how to build resilience in terms of training officers. He made mention of capacity building. We are currently training officers on GIS data collection, IT. We are also going to train them on what we call strategic environmental assessment, how to ensure that the medium-term development plans of the assemblies are climate smart through the assessment of strategic environmental issues related to the medium-term development plan. So these are some of the
Thank you.
Own community action plans.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Prosper. Francis, how do you disseminate you are a researcher, how do you disseminate your research to practitioners? Whom can you reach and who do farmers take up research results from?
Yes, Jafar, thank you for the question. Disseminating research results is very important, and if you conduct research and you leave it on your decks, it's not that useful. So we would usually disseminate our results first in the communities. So with a validation workshop, they help us, they listen to what we found out, and they may disagree or agree. Then we move on to community workshops to actually disseminate. And then here we have community members coming around with the leaders, and they listen to our findings and they also discuss them. Then, of course, we also organize workshops at district levels and regional levels where we have other stakeholders beyond the communities. Government, we have district assembly, we have the regional coordinating councils, we have Ministry of Agriculture, and many extension officers often come into our workshops. We also invite academics who come sit and also share their perspectives. And this has proven to be very useful because that is the stage where you really reach the policymakers. Then, of course, I also use policy briefs also with my team, and policy briefs are useful. They are short, concise, and people are able to get your message by spending just a few minutes reading the policy brief. Reports are another format, but these are often quite voluminous, and they are not shared widely most of the time. We share them with donors and also with some other partners. Academic articles, yes, these are also avenues for disseminating information that we find. And this is rather narrowed to the academic field, and it doesn't go very far. So for the purpose of contributing to policy and ensuring strategies are developed for climate change adaptation and resilience, we focus on workshops. And workshops have proven to be very, very useful. So these methods I would encourage that we put more attention at the community level and the local, district, and regional levels, because we really need to facilitate strategies at the local level. Of course, it's quite important to mainstream climate change policies from the national level to the local level. But at the local level, we have more specific needs that we need to tailor and really address. So we really need to do more studies at the local level and let the people have the information. So Jifa.
Yeah, thank you, Francis.
Yeah.
Abdel, you are also a scientist. How can science, and especially your work in modeling crop yields, help in guiding adaptation planning at the local level?
Thank you very much. So I work with crop models with the broad aim of using these crop models to advise adaptation planning at different levels. So what we know currently is that there is urgent need for information on adaptation plans. What are the action points in terms of making sure that agriculture is resilient across many scales? So this is where the crop models come in as a tool, which we use then to understand the crop production systems and to also anticipate the climate change impacts in these different crop production systems. So once we do the crop modeling, we are trying to match the real farming practices to what the computer can actually simulate, so that once we change the climatic conditions, we can be able to know what is the impact of climate change on crop growth and on yield, so that we can be better prepared. So we know that adaptation planning requires a lot of financing and investments. And to make sure that we have the best rate of return on these investments, we need to invest in adaptation strategies that we know will produce the best outcomes for our farming communities. So this is where the crop models come in to tell us information that we can then implement at different levels. And specifically in this project, we worked at local levels where we were doing the crop modeling in the 3 districts in northern Ghana. And we are also able to simulate within these crop models the different farmer typologies. So we are able to understand how the impacts are different between different types of farmers, and also between different between different locations, as well as between different time periods. So this is important in terms of developing targeted actions, which are important in the NDC implementation or in any other investments, as already explained by Prosper with regards to the work that they are doing. So the work can be more impactful if it is informed by these crop models. And within the crop models, we can also change the production systems and see how improved varieties or irrigation or changing planting dates or using organic or inorganic fertilizers or agroforestry or crop switching or diversification, how will all of these change the yield that the farmer will get, as well as the other economic outcomes. So this is some of the information that we can get from the crop models that we can then use in planning for resilience, for maize systems, for sorghum systems, for peanuts, as well as for millets and other crops. So we see that crop models, they are an important tool in advising or in helping targeted adaptation planning at local levels.
Thank you, Abel. Joyce, you are a smallholder farmer, you are a farmer, and Prosper has already enumerated a number of constraints to farmers, climate change related constraints to agriculture. How can policy support in addressing this? How do you think policy can help you smallholder farmers?
Please, can you come again? My line was breaking.
Okay, so I was asking that, how do you think policy can help you smallholder farmers in the Savannah zone to adapt better to climate change?
Okay, well, in Upper West here, the climate change has really affected us in so many ways. It gives us extreme weather condition. And then also we get drought spells a lot. There are the times, even during the dry season, you end up, during the rainy season.
Joy, you have your mic is off. Please unmute.
Okay. Sorry. My network is poor, so I wanted to turn off the video. Yeah. Thank you very much once again. For a better adaptation, I think the government should develop some policies to help govern us here in order to, minimize the harsh conditions that we are facing here. I think one of them, we have already mentioned it, by developing more dams infrastructures in the communities for irrigation farming during the dry season, because here we get everything in excess. When it is in the dry season, everything is dry. When it is in the rainy season, if the rain is coming, it's also come heavy. So if more dams, like where headworks, canals can be done in the small communities to help with irrigation, I think it's a long way to help. Aside that, I think the local government should also ban farming close to the rivers or the waterways and flood-prone areas to avert the effects of floods as we are experiencing this year. They should also train extension officers in new farming technologies to enhance their support to the farmers. Non-traditional agricultural productions such as mushroom, beekeeping, and snail rearing can be given to the smallholder farmers to help them improve their livelihood. Also, I think the sector should promote within the agri sector, they should promote alternative livelihoods such as soap making. And recently, I think GIZ is actually supporting this by producing a neem oil extraction for biopesticides and other, even liquid soap. I think this, when the government is able to do this for the smallholder farmers, it will go a long way for them to have work throughout the season instead of concentrating. Here we have only one season. So when the rain is over and the harvesting is over, what happens to us? Most of them find themselves going to the southern part to look for non-existing job. So if such skills are being trained, they've been given to the smallholder farmers, it will give them all year round work to do. And then also the agri department should also promote the development of crop varieties and livestock breeds to better adapt the changing climate conditions that we have here. We can also, come along with drought tolerant and easy maturing seeds. Recently, I've been promoting this forgotten cereal called fonio. Fonio is in the millet family, and it's among the world's fastest maturing cereal. And it's led to produce it. And so this is one of the seed in this time of climate change. The volume of water that's required to grow fonio is extraordinarily small compared to other crops such as rice and maize or soybean. So we can introduce such crops to the farmers, which I've been doing here, and that will help in a way to solve the climate change risk that we are going through. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joy. And then I think the roundtable has been very engaging and interesting. I think Joyce, one of the key things that she raised is also something, a question that Jabik has asked, Benjamin Jabik. Can you unmute and ask your question about the rainfall and temperature issues? I think Joy has asked a question, has highlighted irrigation, and Benjamin has asked a question on that. Benjamin, kindly unmute and ask your question to Paula. Is Benjamin here? Let me see. Okay. So I will.
Jifa, in case he's, yeah, I think he has problems to unmute himself maybe, but I can shortly answer the question, and Prosper, I think is also something.
Yes, you can answer the question and then Prosper will come in.
Yeah,
so Paula, please.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I already tried to answer in the chat. I mean, our study results analyzed also the potential of irrigation and said that it has a great economic potential, and also has, of course, great big economic inputs that need to be given, as Antwi also already pointed out. And one also has to say that it's very good to do dry season irrigation and can bring a lot of benefits to farmers, but also can only be done where it's economically feasible and also sustainable in a way. And we found out that river discharge is probably likely to remain stable. So there can, especially in the Black Water, there is still potential to take water out of it in a sustainable manner, but also, of course, not unlimited, and also only in some region where the water is available and where then economically feasible to do irrigation.
Okay. Prosper.
Yes, Jifa.
Yes.
Please, can you hear me?
Yes, your hand is up. Okay.
Hello.
Hello, Prosper, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, yes, looking at the issue of irrigation, yes, there's the need for us to ensure that at the policy level or at governmental level, we are increasing the access of farmers to irrigation through building dams and then, mechanized boreholes and all that. But I think we should begin to focus more on building the adaptive capacity. Another thing I've realized is that you have a number of farmers building, garden wells, as they call it. And for me, it's a very useful tool for farmers to be able to do their own irrigation rather than sitting down and then waiting for a certain government to come in and then build, dams and irrigation, which takes time. So my approach is, how do we ensure that the adaptive capacities of these farmers are enhanced, so they are on their own, they'll be able to build some of these small wells in their farms to be able to do farming, especially irrigation farming and of vegetables, which is very critical. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Prosper. So you are highlighting a very important point about having technologies that are cheaper, so that farmers themselves can handle, manage them. Dr. Enchibusiako, please can you come in?
Yes, I think, thank you, Jifa. On the issue of the irrigation, I think it's very critical. Prosper in his presentation said so many good things that we need to actually take serious as a country. And then my focus has to do with even the very source of the water for irrigation. There's some culture coming up in this country where we are destroying everything related to water resource. And so you may even have the nicest concepts either at the farm level or provided by the community to be able to sort of provide water for off-season farming activities. If the resource itself is not available in the soil or on the ground, you cannot tap it in the first place. And this is where we need to be very careful as people, as community, so that we stop destroying the very existence of our livelihoods, because most of the things that we are doing are actually destroying the water base. And then at some time may come, even small wells might not even function if we continue to destroy the way we are destroying as people. Joy in her presentation talked about we looking at not farming into water bodies. And this is something that is happening across the country. We have a law that is not functioning, because if you look at the Forestry Commission and then also the Water Resources Commission, let me even focus on Water Resources Commission. They have this 50-50 buffer zone policy that has to be domesticated by the assemblies to make sure that these things are implemented. These things are not been working at the local level. And the very people that we want to support.
Dr. Moa. Hello, okay. So Joy, I think Dr. Moa will come back, but
have
Joy.
To start negative effects of some of these practices.
Dr. Moa, we lost you.
Yes, Doc.
We lost you. We lost you. So can you, the last 30 seconds of your presentation, can you repeat that?
Okay, sorry. So what I was saying in concluding was saying that we need to sort of educate the very people we want to support, because the emphasis is supporting the community. And it's this same community people, especially the young ones, that are destroying the water resources that are available. And so we need to create awareness about the negative feedback system of this very act that we've put in across in the country. That's what I was saying, Doc.
Yes, thank you so much. A very important point. I grew up in a place in my hometown where we had several wetlands. Today, all those wetlands are now rubbish dams, all of them, almost all of them. So it's a very important one. And Joy, you want to come in. And please, colleagues, put your questions in the chat, or you can raise your electronic hand and I will call you to speak. Okay, Joy.
Yes, one very important point that I would like to add is the rampant bush burning is serious here. At the end, from November, December, if your crop is still on the field, then you should be rest assured that you are going to lose it to fire. So I think the government should make a very serious policy to ban the burning of the grasses. Sometimes they intentionally burn it. It's like they enjoy burning it. And when you ask them, they will tell you they are the dwarfs. Dwarfs came to burn it. Dwarfs like living in the forest. Why would a dwarf burn bush? It's a serious issue here. Most farmers lose their hard work farming to fire. So we need serious policy to ban the burning of bush. It's not for just hunting. They don't do hunting. It's like passion. They do it. They enjoy doing it. Sometimes you'll be coming from your farm and you see a running fire moving towards your farm and there's nothing you can do. Not even the fire service can quench it. So I think this is something I would like you to really put it down for me, wherever it can go. It's very serious here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Prosper.
Maybe one last one. Yes, I agree entirely with Dr. Amoa on the need to protect the surface water we have and stop destroying it. However, I'm heavily convicted when it comes to our usage of underground water. Ghana is one of the countries not doing so well when it comes to underground water usage. we are still doing less than 10% of our underground water, which is a very, useful and a reliable source of water that we can really tap into to ensure that we are building this kind of resilience in the area of irrigation for our farmers. So I think it's something that policy may have to find a way of addressing. How do we ensure that we actually explore the potentials of our underground water? Then on the issue of bushfires, I agree with you entirely. And that's one of the biggest threats to agricultural sustainability in the Upper West region. Next week or next 2 weeks, we are currently going to hold a forum. All the development partners in the Upper West region, we are holding a forum with the Regional House of Chiefs, with other stakeholders, to have a dialogue with them around this issue of bushfires. And you see, it's a complex, setting. There are communities that have been able to do that, and I think they are doing very well. Gozere is one of the communities that have been able to control bushfires in their community for over 35 years, which is really recommendable. I mean, looking at Upper West region and a community within other communities being able to, deal with the issue of bushfires, the community that has not been for over 35 years in Nandom. And it's really, for me, remarkable. How can we learn from the best practices of communities like that to be able to ensure that other communities are also, emulating the best practices to be able to deal with the issues of bushfires? Conservation agriculture, we talk about it, but if we don't deal with bushfires, we can accumulate enough biomass or soil or ground cover, and that will not give us the required results. So I agree entirely with you, and I think we have to, deal with it head on. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Prosper. I think we are doing very well with time. Benjamin's mic is not working, so he has a direct question to Dr. Amwa. Dr. Amwa, Benjamin is asking that, do you think that the inappropriate targeting in piloting the adaptation models are the reasons we end up whetting the appetite of farmers?
Thank you, Doc. I think I see it in two ways when it comes to this piloting issue. I think the first angle that I look at it from is from the project developers themselves.
Dr. Amwa.
Knowing very well sometimes that the projects. Yes, Doc. Yes, Doc.
Okay, we lost you, but you can continue now, please.
Okay, sorry. I don't know why the internet is misbehaving that way. Thank you. What I was saying was that for the piloting, from my perspective, I think I will look at it from two angles. One is the project developers themselves, mostly because most of the project that we have in this country has been donor funded. And so these are coming from the angle of the donor. Most of these donors actually know from the onset that they have limited budget that cannot be upscaled. But then they term the project as piloting. And so when you say you are piloting, it connotes the understanding that you are piloting, you're learning lessons, and then the lessons will inform the next cycle of activity or program or projects that are supposed to be done. But in most of the cases, they don't have that as part of their planning. Making it worse from that angle is the fact that recently it's improving. In the past, some of these projects are just planted in the areas where they are without going through the national structures or the assembly structures for them to be able to be part of the process, so that when the project ends, at least there should be continuity or some kind of sustainability process penned down. I think we've been raising issues about this, and gradually some of these things are getting better. And so one of the things that is whetting the appetite without getting upscaling is the fact that the donors themselves actually knew in most of the cases that they don't have the money to upscale. That's one. The other aspect might be maybe the cooperation of the communities when these projects were being implemented. And when I say community, including all stakeholders involved in the project implementation cycle, the donor or the funder might, in some cases, might not be able to get the needed support. And so the interest of probably maybe continuing might not be there because sometimes you need to actually see the commitment of the people, because these are people that you are actually helping. And if you are not getting their buy-in in terms of support, especially when everything has to be monetized, so that everything, even a meeting, you expect to get some money, otherwise you're not even attending meetings. It actually demoralizes the donor for actually even keeping moving forward. The last one might be maybe the technical aspect of which maybe the project outcomes might not be feasible for upscaling or replication. So these are the angles probably that I can look at the replications. I just want to also indicate that, I teach at the University of Ghana at the Climate Change Center. And some of the projects that I give to my students at the master's level are some of these things to actually go down the ground and then come back to give us feedback systems as to how some of these piloting are not actually happening. And some of these things do actually play very well at the academic level. Thank you, Doc.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amwa, and all our panelists, our audience. Thank you so much. We will have the last words from all panelists, 30 seconds. So, Dr. Amwa, what are your party words for us?
I think the climate is changing and we need to be resilient. And so we need all stakeholders on board. Thank you.
Thank you. Samuel.
Yes, I think it's a collective effort, and all hands must be on deck to ensure that climate change does not eat us up. Thank you.
Okay, collective efforts. Francis.
Yeah, so I'd like to say that whilst we advocate for agency and adaptation, we should also bear in mind sustainability issues, that we don't end up being maladaptive and have more negative impact on the environment. So let's always pay a critical eye and include sustainability in our analysis.
Thank you, Francis. Abel.
Thank you. I would say that the impacts of climate change are already with us, but we have to be more prepared so that we can reduce this. So there are tools and methods that we can use already to make sure that as the climate is changing, as communities, we are more prepared so that we reduce the impact.
Thank you. Prosper.
Yes, thank you. Yes, for me, I would say there's a need for a more sustained, collaborative, efforts by all stakeholders to ensure that we are really dealing with the issues of climate change. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and Joy. Joy, are you there? Joy?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
I think I will stress on the bushfire still. We need strong policies to ban this rampant bush burning. It's really harming us here. It's harming the soil, the crop, and then the environment. So that is what I'll stress on as my final words. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all panelists and our attendees, for keeping us together to this hour. I will give the floor back to Paula and Professor Christophe to give us the closing remarks.
Paula, would you start or should I?
Yes.
Go ahead, Christoph.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, thanks also from my side for this very productive meeting and for all the questions you put in the chat. I would, not a long summary, but just underline what Samuel just mentioned. I think, yeah, we need this collective effort. And I think we have seen in the debate that we have a lot of aspects to target when it comes to implementing adaptation at the local level. We have seen that there are much more constraints that there are, as we may see in the first view. So in addition to the typical biophysical constraints, which we have discussed a lot, there are economic constraints, there are institutional constraints, and we all have to consider them to get an implementation strategy in the end implemented. And I guess therefore we need some prioritization, we need more information, and in the end we only have very limited time. The time is very scarce, and constantly the costs for adaptation are increasing as the losses and damages caused by climate change are increasing while we are speaking here. So urgent action is needed. Thanks from my side.
Yeah, thank you to all of you, and also to Jifa for the great moderation. I think a lot has been said also from you, Christoph, now. But I found it also very enriching to hear a call for collaboration from so many different angles in the last word. So I very much hope we can take this discussion up and work together on this collaboration. And I hope we will in the future. So thank you very much. And to Jifa, if you would like to close, I would give back to you.
Yes. Thanks once again to all of you, everyone, for sitting here for 2 hours and for a very important discussion, which has been very engaging. I think climate change issues are very important for all of us. And we hope that we will take this discussion forward, continue the discussion, and then the collaborations. And we will in the future have many more of these opportunities to interact and talk about the work we are doing, and also to send it back to the communities. Thanks so much, and goodbye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.